Hey everybody, this is Mr. Moppin coming at you with another APUSH video. Continuing to take a look at topic 2.4 on transatlantic trade. And of course, we're taking a look at the 17th and early 18th centuries. Now, last time, one of the things that we addressed was the emergence of what we called the Navigation Acts. Now, the Navigation Acts are clearly an attempt by England to dominate colonial economic policies in order to benefit financially England, Mother England. So now, that being said, they came with a lot of stipulations, as you can see here. There's rules about trading using English ships as opposed to colonial ships. Trading goods potentially potentially having to trade those goods through England before it could go anywhere else, or certain enumerated goods like tobacco having to be sold only to England. As you can see, there's going to be a lot of rules that are going to be placed on how colonists are going to try to trade, across the world. Now, that's going to have a profound effect on these American colonists at the time. And let's break down, what are going to be some of the upsides and some of the downsides regarding these collective Navigation Acts policies. Now, one of the benefits that we're going to see is that, if you're now going to have the British really kind of oversee your trade, that's going to give you more expansion in terms of shipping goods around the globe. And that's in part because you're talking about British ships manned with British crews, like trade ships manned by British crews, that are also going to be protected by the best navy in the world, the UK, the Brits. So if you are a colonial, entrepreneur, you're going to have a lot more confidence that the goods that you ship to, say, the Caribbean or to Europe or Africa or wherever, even South America, that it's going to get there. It's going to arrive in one piece, so to speak. It's not going to be hijacked by pirates and, stuff like that. So that is certainly going to be a benefit for sure. Whereas if you're doing it on your own, it's a lot more up in the air whether or not that's going to, be safe for you. On top of that, if you are, for example, producing tobacco and you're one of those enumerated goods, if you are being told that you can only sell to England, well, guess what? You now got a guaranteed buyer of your product. So, if England is saying that you can't trade to anybody else because we're going to buy it from you, well, that's good. You want to have guaranteed sales of your product. You don't want anything that's kind of left behind, as inventory, if you will. So there are some, noticeable, clear upsides to what is going to be, these Navigation Acts. However, you're going to hear a lot of grumbling from American colonists with regards to these Navigation Acts. First off, one of the rules that was very common being that colonial businesses could only sell to England in many respects raw materials. So, for example, timber, now note, what does England do with that timber? Well, as we mentioned before, they're going to take that raw material from, say, New Hampshire, and they're going to take that to England, and in England, they're going to convert that timber into some type of furniture, if you will. Well, now England's going to sell that product globally. But what's really going to be irritating for a lot of these colonists is the idea being is that, hey, if I'm an entrepreneur in New Hampshire and I have access to my own timber and I have the means to turn that timber into furniture myself and then be able to sell to my colonial neighbors in, say, New England, well, then that's not possible. I could only sell it to England. And then what is England going to do with that timber? They're going to make furniture, and guess what? They're going to sell it back to me. And they're going to charge me a higher price for it. So for many of these colonists, they were pretty ticked off at the idea of they know that they could functionally, on their own, make their own products, sell it in their own colonies, if you will, and do it at a cheaper price and maximize a profit. But these rules that are coming down from England, these Navigation Acts, that's going to put a chokehold on that. And so you're going to feel like you're kind of a captive producer of raw materials and then a captive consumer of finished British products. So that's going to be pretty problematic. And note, if you are, say, cultivating tobacco in Virginia, yeah, it's cool that you've got a guaranteed buyer. You don't have inventory that's going to be hanging out, so to speak. But if there's only one possible buyer, well, it's the buyer that's going to set the price functionally for that product. So if you are England and you're the only buyer legally of that product, you're going to lowball the producer of that product. You're going to be telling that tobacco farmer, hey, we're going to only pay you X for that amount of tobacco. Whereas you as a farmer of tobacco might know that, hey, you know what? If I were to be able to sell this on the open market, I might be able to get a higher price for it if I were to sell it to French Haitians, if you will, or sell it to, Portuguese Brazilians or Spanish, Mexicans or something along those lines. That's really going to make you upset. So there's definitely going to be a sense that you don't have anything resembling real economic freedom with these navigation acts. And note, England doesn't care. England doesn't view the colonies as their equals. They just don't. England has a very paternalistic idea of the colonies. And England kind of has the idea of, well, what's best for England is then what's down the road best for you. And we as the mother country know what's best for you. So you just do your job of following the rules and let us make the rules. So that's going to create some tension. And once again, think long term. Think about the idea of, you've got a distant, faraway government telling you what to do economically, telling you what's best, even though you know what's best for yourself. That's going to really rankle you over time. And that's going to, eventually be one of many causes for the American Revolution. But in the short term, one of the other important effects of the Navigation Acts is the idea being is that, well, if I am going to have very strict rules on being able to trade with, say, the Spanish or the French or the Dutch or whoever, there is a loophole. Trading with the natives, because the natives are not recognized as truly independent countries. That's obviously, some European, racism going on there. But nonetheless, colonists are going to be wise to this, and that's going to be seen as a loophole to be able to increase trade with natives. And if we're going to be seeing increased trade with the natives on many of these goods, well, what's going to be the result of that? Well, the more you trade with a group, the more you're going to have social interactions with that group. That's pretty typical. It's pretty natural, generally speaking. And so what does that then do? Well, the more that you socially interact, even if it's the result of increased economic interactions, it will lead to a coming together, generally speaking. Now note, we're not talking about at the level of like the Spanish. We're not talking about to the level of emerging with an emergent, distinct ethnic culture, like the mestizos. But it is going to give access to for white American colonists into native communities, and in some cases you're going to see that be exploited to promote Christianity, and it's also going to be used on occasion to see a window for marriage between whites and natives. Now, note, this is on a much smaller, far more scaled back level in the English American colonies than what you see once again with Spain, but it does open it up a little bit. Opens it up a little bit. Now, that being said, when we do talk about these laws that have been created, these navigation acts, we do have to realize that there's a difference between laws on paper and how those laws are actually enforced. Legislation can mean a whole lot of stuff, but it really doesn't mean much of anything unless they're properly enforced. And what happens is that even though you've kind of got, as a colonist, you've got this kind of overarching specter of Parliament telling you can't do this, you can't do that, it's got to be done this way, the reality, especially over time, as we get into the latter part of the 17th century, early part of the 18th century, there's going to be, more and more this sense of what we call salutary neglect. In other words, a very weak enforcement, policy regarding these laws. And there's going to be reasons for that. Remember, you're talking about England, putting down some pretty strict rules, but you're talking about an island that is thousands of miles away and takes literally months to get from England to the colonies in America. So that's going to be pretty hard. It's hard to enforce things properly when you are literally thousands of miles and months away. Also, the American colonies are not going to always be the priority of England and Parliament. They got a lot of other things they're focusing in on, especially during this time period, late 17th into the 18th century. Plenty of European wars, especially wars with France. So that's going to be distracting. And let's be honest, you can create a lot of good laws, but you have to have the people that are enforcing those laws be on the level to actually have them achieve what you want them to achieve. And many of these folks that are going to be, that are supposed to be on paper enforcing these rules, they kind of look at these rules as, are they really that important? Especially when you've got colonial entrepreneurs coming to these officials and kind of, hey, how you doing? Hey, good to see you. How's the family? Blah, blah, blah. And, here's a little gift for the family for Christmas. Oh, here's a little gift for the newborn, yada, yada. The idea being is that you've got trade law officials, enforcement officials that are more than willing to have their hands out, more than willing to have their palms greased by these colonial businessmen to take the money, look the other way, to be able to have more of a sense of independence. So understand that on paper, this looks really bad. And it is certainly setting a precedent that England does have the right to tell the colonies what to do economically. But in the short term, at least, the reality on the ground is that it's not nearly going to be as much of a stranglehold as it might be. You are going to see a very robust smuggling environment, ecosystem, if you will, emerge in British colonial America. People selling to one another, on the down low. People, selling goods to, the Caribbean with, enforcement officials getting bribed, looking the other way. So, it's not as bad as it appears. But note, the key thing, though, is that England has set that precedent. And even though it's salutary neglect now, it's not going to be salutary neglect forever. This is going to be reappearing in a very, very important way in the mid-18th century following the French and Indian War. And this is when things are really going to get to a boiling point. But we'll get there eventually. For right now, we'll leave it there. Okay? We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.